Hola a todos, seguimos en la diferencia, seguimos buscando respuestas sobre la diferencia, sobre aquello que nos hace únicos, sobre nuestro potencial de alguna manera. A veces la diferencia es obvia, otras es más sutil, en ocasiones explotamos en diferencia y de otras formas es un poquito más sutil de alguna manera. Pero lo que está claro es que la diferencia, que detectar tu diferencia es el primer paso para empezar a construir una carrera creativa, ¿no? Detectar aquello que te hace especial, que te hace único y construir, cruzándolo de alguna manera con tu talento y construir tu carrera a partir de aquí. Ahora cruzamos el Atlántico y nos vamos a entrevistar a Bruce Mau, un gurú, un gran referente del mundo del diseño que acaba de publicar ese libro del que hablaremos en breve. Y antes de todo quiero, uno, saludar y dos, empezar por intentar identificar su diferencia. So Bruce, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And I would like to start right away with asking you, what do you think makes you different? What makes you unique? What is this special thing about you?
I think for me, there are three things. The first is that I'm not educated. And so I have no confidence in my knowledge, which means I am really hungry always for knowledge, which means that I read everything. I want to know what we know. I want to know what we can know and what we can't know. I'm a researcher. I'm constantly learning and processing new information. Because I don't have a formal education, I've really kind of constructed my own strange library of knowledge. And in that researching mode, I had to become a writer. I had to write things down. And I write with images and ideas, and I don't separate things. So I don't think of them. I don't do the manuscript and then put the images. I make a visual, agglomeration from the outset, and I really think holistically about the experience of ideas. So that's the first. The second is I'm slow and relentless. I never give up. I keep going when everyone else stops, and I really push through to solutions. I've been working on projects for over 30 years. Wow. That I haven't started yet.
Wow.
I just keep going, and I have a way somehow to stick with things where other people stop. And then I think the third thing is I'm a collaborator. I really know how to work with people. I know how to inspire people, and I make inspiration a job. Not something that happens by accident. It's really our responsibility to inspire people as designers. And in fact, it's the first principle in the MC24 book. The first principle is first inspire, design is leadership, lead by design. So I take that responsibility seriously, and I can help people find their talent and do things that they didn't believe they could do. And I can help people work together with other people. I have a talent for inspiring groups of people to accomplish things. When I think about the work that I did with Rem Koolhaas, the way that we were able to accomplish SMLXL, the book that we did together, was that Rem is like a turbulent river, and I'm like a rock in the river.
Perfect combination, yeah.
And it was a great combination.
There's lots of things that you said that I want to dig into. First of all, you said you can help people find their talent. how can you help them and how can they help themselves too? What tools do you recommend? What do you recommend to connect with your talent and start building a career?
You know, I start from the premise that people are talented and intelligent. So I start from the premise that there's intelligence on the receiving end of our work. And what that does is really, it brings a kind of dignity to the way that we relate to one another.
Mm-hmm.
And and if you start from that premise, um, and not from the premise that you have to prove to me that you're intelligent and talented, um, I find that it raises people up and lifts people, and allows them to do things that um, they might not have felt permission to do. And I think that that ability to do things that you might fail at is really important in a creative practice. That, you know, I was very fortunate to have Frank Gehry as a mentor and collaborator early on.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and Frank asked me to do things I had never done.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Frank, you know, I really don't know how to do that. And, uh, you know, I've never done anything like that. You know, the first job that I did as a real kind of, you know, environmental graphics project was Walt Disney Concert Hall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I said, Frank, I've never even designed a washroom sign. You know, like, I have no idea how this works. And his approach was, yeah, I want to see how you do it.
Wow.
And it was really, you know, it was really important in my life and work. And so I bring that kind of spirit to it.
Mm-hmm. You said at the beginning that you didn't receive a formal education. Was that because you didn't want to? Was that because you weren't offered to? Was that a personal choice?
No, I couldn't quite do it. I went to college and I got into art school. But I had a pretty rough time there, and I only lasted 18 months.
Uh-huh.
And for the longest time, I thought I failed college. And that was kind of the story, the narrative that I had in my mind. But recently, actually working on this book, I realized I didn't really fail. I just did it very quickly. Because when I was in college, you know, it blew my mind. It completely like opened my eyes to a new world. I met a new group of people, a new tribe that I really loved. I learned a new language. I didn't know anything. I mean, I never really heard the word design until then.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a job doing what I love. Um, and if you look up, you know, what is a college experience supposed to do for you? those, those are the four things. I just did them in 18 months instead of 4 years.
Yes.
And I eventually did get an honorary degree from the school that I went to. So
Okay.
I kind of got it the hard way.
All right. What would you say, Bruce, are you best at? What would you say is your more identifiable talent?
I would say that I'm best at the most vexing, complex problems,
Mm-hmm.
problems that cross disciplines and boundaries. People often call me when others have failed. So, you know, we're quite often working with people where they've tried other things and it didn't work and they can't figure out how to do it. You know, I think holistically and I don't respect boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
you know, intellectually and you know, from kind of, you
Mm-hmm.
know, my spirit is that way. So I don't start with the solution that I know how to do. I think a lot of designers start from what they can produce. So, you know, if you ask an architect about a problem, their solution will be a building. And we start from the problem and expand the brief as much as possible. And that's a really important distinction because if you think about what is what has happened to the design brief over the last, half century, we tried to make it as small as possible, as precise as we could get it. The ideal brief was a single word. We go the other direction. We go the opposite direction to say, how do we expand the brief to really understand the context of the problem and really understand all the implications of the solution? So, we suffer from a one-to-one, problem solution relationship.
Mhm.
And what we really need is an ecological problem solution relationship. We need that problem solved in the context of life, not in the context of business.
Mhm. How would you describe your creative process or your process on making these briefs wider to like make the problem like very specific, and then how do you go about finding a solution about it?
Well, it's interesting because that's really the origin of the MC24 book.
Yes.
I was asked about that. I was asked that question 10 years ago, and I realized that I didn't really have an answer.
Uh-huh.
I just evolved a kind of intuitive way of doing it. I
Yes.
knew how to do it. And I realized, not knowing isn't a good answer.
Uh-huh.
So I decided to sit down and try to figure out what is the process? What are the principles that I apply? By then I had done about 20 years of work. So I could look at a very diverse body of work. We were designing cities and carpets and social movements and institutions and brands. I mean, like very, unbounded kind of exploration. And I wanted to know, are there principles that we could apply that anyone could learn? And that's really how we got to the MC24 principles. At the core of it, and I think at the core of our design culture, is caring.
Mm-hmm.
You think about our DNA is empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Think about what we do. We solve other people's problems,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm not solving my problems. I've got some that I should work on, but I'm solving my clients' problems. I need to understand them. I need to really feel what it means
Mm-hmm.
to have that problem.
Mm-hmm.
What it feels like to not succeed, what it feels like to fail
Mm-hmm.
and not solve that problem. And so empathy is really the kind of core of all the methodology. But what we've done is to say, look, here are specific tools that you can use to really help you think about what you're doing
So,
and get better solutions.
so you recommend applying these 24 principles when you're faced to solve a problem, right?
Exactly. And it's really like a toolkit. It's not a linear process. Right? So
Okay.
it's not 1, 2, 3,
Okay.
23, 24. It's really like having a toolkit at home.
Mm-hmm.
You don't always use the hammer first.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you have to look at the situation, know what the tools do, and then connect them. So sometimes you're going to reach for the hammer, and sometimes you need a screwdriver, and you have to know what the difference is.
Mm-hmm.
And in a similar way, it's a set of kind of intellectual tools to say, how do I think about allowing failure? How do I explore ideas quickly and cheaply?
Mm-hmm.
And what's the best way to think about low resolution ideas fast and cheap?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's what the sketching principle is all about, to say you need a culture of sketching, and you have to support what that means if you want that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, a lot of companies um, don't allow failure. They don't want any failure in their business.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a design process is a process of rapid failure. You want to get all the failures out and out of the way. Right? Like you want to know what they are and get them off the table.
Mhm.
And that means you need a quick process to do that in a way that you can share. And that's what Sketch is all about.
What about, I've been looking through all the principles. I've written 4 down, but I would like to know from you, are there any key principles that you always use in your creative processes? Are like a top 3 or top 4 that you would like to expand a little bit about?
Okay, so I think the first one, um, first inspire, design is leadership, lead by design. That is for me our principal responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
We can't make people change,
Mm-hmm.
right? None of us has the power or control to reshape and make people do things.
Mm-hmm.
The only way we can make the change that we need in the world, and we need to change everything. Um, you know, Practically everything we do is done in the old way. Uh, it assumes that we have unlimited resources, that we own and dominate nature. Uh, you know, uh, Everything has to change in that regard. The only way we can accomplish it is if we inspire people to go to a new place that is better than the old place. And I don't think designers realize how powerful they are in that regard, that we have the ability to produce a vision of the future and to help people to step by step make their way to that more positive vision. The only way out of the mess that we're in is design. Right? Like it's either design or leave it to chance.
Mm-hmm.
And if we leave it to chance, we arrive at where we are now. If we hope to have a long-term viability on the planet, we will apply design and make the changes that we need.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first one.
Great.
The last one, work on what you love,
Mm-hmm.
is in some ways equally powerful and important. During the process, I wasn't sure that it should be a principle. That I thought maybe this is just too kind of soft and airy fairy, work on what you love.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I worked on it, the more I realized that in some ways that's maybe the most important one. In other words, connecting your passion and your work, what you truly want your time and energy to be committed to, and the output of your daily work and the time in your life is maybe the most important thing we can do. That um, I'm arguing that designers should be more selfish, to be more generous.
Mm-hmm.
The more that designers really worked on the things that improve the world that they know they want to do, the better the world will be. And so, and that's there's a method to it that's really important, which is to put out a pure signal. So when I was first starting,
Yes.
I knew that there were people around the world who were looking for me, but they'd never heard of me. I
Mm-hmm.
was the perfect person for their job, but
They didn't know of you.
they had to find me, and I had to find them.
Yes.
And I realized the only way I could do that was to put out a pure signal that would kind of travel in this kind of filament around the world,
Uh-huh.
so that one person in Barcelona could see what I was doing and say to themselves, that's the person for me. And then I would find them. They would find me and I would find them.
Uh-huh.
And so when I started working, I had clients who were very, very low budget. I worked for a client called New Music Toronto.
Uh-huh.
And they had very, very small budget, and they wanted me to do their work. So I said, look, I will do it on one condition, that you can't change it. And I'll do it for the price that you have,
Uh-huh.
which is very low, but I'm willing to do it, but you can't fix it. You can't You can't change anything. You can say yes or no. So if you say no, I'll do another one.
Okay.
You can't fix it. I'll
Okay.
do another one. I'll keep doing. As long as you say no, I'll do another one. But you have to do exactly as I design them. And they said, fine, that works for us. And they never changed anything. I did all their work for several years, and some of the most beautiful things that I did. And I was able to do that because I was living like a student. I lived like a student for about 15 years
Uh-huh.
in order to be able to do the work that I really loved.
Okay.
And it took a long time for people to see it. Right? Like, you've got to send that message out, and they've got to find you at the right time. It's a long process sometimes. And I still am. I do work with people that I met 15 or 20 years ago, and it was never right for us to work together until now. And it really goes back to that idea of keeping your situation such that you have the freedom to do the work that you really love.
Mm. And somehow this living as a student for 15 years, I guess it was the best investment of your life, no?
It was. I mean, that's what really allowed me to do Zone Books. And Zone Books, I would say, is probably the most important project of my life.
Mm.
And I did everything that they produced for 20 years.
Mm.
Very few designers have ever had that kind of long-term, total commitment. And I learned so much by reading everything. I read everything that we produced. So I worked with the authors and the editors. It was like doing a PhD for 20
Of
years.
course.
It was a wonderful,
Mm.
a PhD that you couldn't possibly find
I
anywhere on
know.
the planet. It was great. It was just incredible.
Mhm. So we have the first principle of inspiration, the importance of working on what you love. Any
Mhm.
other that you would point out?
I think one of the other, I'd say, most important and kind of new ways of thinking in the book is compete with beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the foundation of that principle is that beauty is a competitive idea. In other words, um, you think about what we will do for beauty, what we will suffer for beauty, what we will pay for beauty, the distance we will go for beauty.
Mm-hmm.
Our commitment to beauty is unmatched. I mean, nothing in the world moves us the way that beauty does.
Yes.
I mean, think about how much money we invest in beauty, and yet we almost don't teach it. I mean,
Mm.
if you went into an architecture school in Spain today and you put up a project and you said, I did it because it's beautiful, you would get an F.
Totally. Totally.
You would be kicked out of school.
Yes.
Um, and it's not considered a serious way of thinking.
Mm.
I mean, almost no company has a beauty strategy. Right? Very, very few companies have a beauty strategy to really understand their business.
Mm.
Apple did, and they became the most valuable company in human history. And if you take the beauty out of Apple, you have a reasonably good technology company. But when you put the beauty in, you have a commitment, a global commitment to the brand of Apple that is unlike anything else on earth.
Mm.
And you have the most valuable company in human history as a consequence.
Mm-hmm.
And you have, uh, the ability to change the world. So all of those things really come back to beauty, and the fact that Jobs insisted that the motherboard was beautiful, right? That the actual design of the card inside the machine also was resolved beautifully,
Mm.
I think tells you how important it is as a way of thinking and working. And so what we've done in the book is to say, look, you don't need to be you don't need a master's degree in design to understand and use beauty in your work. You can actually break it down into these 13 dimensions and understand beauty as a way of thinking. So if you take, contrast, contrast is a dimension of beauty. Well, every client I've ever worked for wants to be in the foreground against the noisy background. They want contrast. What we as designers produce for them is contrast.
Mm.
We allow people to find them and see them
Mm.
out of the noisy, out of the noisy background.
Mhm.
And so you realize that these dimensions of beauty are really important design considerations that anyone can, once you understand it, anyone can do it.
Totally. Mhm. We've talked about your book. Is there any book you've given lots of times or that you've reread and that you've revisited lots of times, like a guide for you?
Yeah. There is an extraordinary set of books. It's not a single book. I give them as a set
Uh-huh.
to close friends by a man named Georgi Kepish, who led a program at MIT, and he did a series called Vision and Value.
Uh-huh.
And I always have a couple sets on hand because he's so good.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's a comprehensivist approach to design. So the Vision and Value series, it includes, design in education, in nature, in form, in symbols. I mean, he really looked at design in some ways for the first time as this kind of, comprehensivist, holistic approach. And the contributors were, I mean, the contributors are just really a who's who of, the best thinking of that era. And it really is a kind of inspiration for me.
Bruce, can you spell the name out for me, please?
Yeah, it's Georgi Kepish. It's Gyorgy.
Okay.
Kepish is Kepes.
Okay, great. Super. All right. Why do you do what you do? What's behind the whole hours, efforts, readings, analysis? What is there? Why you do what you do?
Well, I mentioned earlier that design is caring. And for me, that's really that's the kind of driver of everything that we do.
Mm.
What we've learned is that we have to design for all of life. We have to develop, we have to go beyond human-centered design to a life-centered design and really think holistically about the impact of our work and the scope of our work. So for me, that core concept of caring is really why I do it. And if you think about that, you know, designers care about the citizen. We care about the individual user experience. So when I'm designing for my clients, I'm working for a business, but I'm thinking about the person having the experience, right, that I'm designing. And if you care about the citizen, you can't not care about their community, right? I can't take a person out of their context that they're part of. And if I think about the community, I have to think about their ecology. I have to think about the environment that sustains their community. And it really changes the responsibility of design to really think about all of life as a practical objective. That's really our new mandate and our responsibility. And when I first started talking about this, people said, "Bruce, you're power hungry. You're a megalomaniac. You just want to control everything." And for me, it's not about control. It's about responsibility. It's like when we fail to take responsibility for ecosystems, we design for failure. You know, we destroy the things that we touch simply because of the scale of the number of people that we are. Like we're on our way to 8 billion and going to 10 billion. And the only chance we have is to design how we live.
Mm. You were talking now about failure. What would you say is the failure from which you've learned the most?
I think getting fired by Frank, by Frank
I
Gehry.
didn't know this one.
Yeah, we had a bit of a run-in. You know, he was wrong to fire me. You know, I did a really great project with him, and he didn't like it, and it led to him firing me. And it was really, you know, it was very hard to take because he was not only my collaborator and friend, but also a real mentor for me. Not only as a designer, but also as a person. You know, he was very instrumental in my thinking. You know, Frank, when I was quite young, and I started to get a lot of you know, a lot of attention, Frank took me aside and said, you know, almost everyone I know who has experienced what's happening to you has been destroyed by it. They have not survived the kind of attention that you're getting. And I just want you to know that the work doesn't care about fame. When you're facing the work, it only cares about what you're going to do in the moment. It has no awareness of whether you're famous or not. The work is the work.
Mm.
And I want you to focus on the work. And, you know, if the fame happens, great. And if it doesn't, great. Like, just focus on the work. And it was such a good piece of advice that, you know, I've always tried to really do as much as I can to focus on the work and make that the, so in some ways, and I don't know if Frank was aware of it at the time, but when he fired me, he also liberated me
Uh-huh.
to really become my own independent person. So it was a kind of negative and positive simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to a 20-year-old Bruce?
That's funny. I would say marry B.C. Williams.
Uh-huh.
Because I think it's probably the best decision that I made in my life.
Uh-huh.
BC is my life partner, really in every sense, you
Uh-huh.
know, emotionally, domestically, intellectually,
Mm.
economically. I mean, and that turned out to be really the greatest thing that I've done in my life.
Wow. It all comes down to love, no? At the end of the day. It does. It does. As you were saying, no, work also on what you love. So it's
Yeah.
such an important drive, no?
Yeah.
Um, do you remember the project from which you've learned the most? Like this project in your life, or it might still have to happen, I don't know, but like this vital project that you said, this really made a change.
I think Massive Change was a life changer for me.
Okay.
Uh, you know, we started a school to do the project. We started the Institute Without Boundaries. We did 20 person years of research, which really made the difference. It made the project what it is.
Yes.
And we met 200 or 300 of the world's greatest innovators.
Wow.
People solving the most, you know, vexing, difficult problems in the history of humanity. we met the people who took smallpox off the face of the earth. And we think of smallpox as a disease in history, but it killed 500 million people in the 20th century. Right? Not, it killed lots of people in the 16th century too, but last century it killed 500 million people in a painful, torturous death. I mean, it's not, you don't go gently. It was really cruel. And these folks had organized and designed solutions to eliminate the disease. It's no longer on the planet. I mean, it's like, it's hard to fathom how amazing that is. And we just kind of take it for granted, right? Like that we do these things. I mean, if you think about the coronavirus, we have over 100 vaccine projects, basically 100 design projects happening around the world simultaneously to confront this crisis, and moving at speeds that were unheard of. I mean, vaccination only happened mid-century, middle of the last century. So for most of history, it just runs wild and kills millions or billions. And so you see that meeting those people was a life changer. It was, I met people who, wake up in the morning and change the world. And that's what design is capable of. And so that's really what we're committed to.
What about if you could impact lots of people with just one short, clear message? Imagine it to be projected in Times Square in New York, I don't know, but one important message that people could benefit from. What message would it be?
I would say it's a message that I learned from working with Indigenous leaders in Northern Canada, which is where the concept of life-centered design comes from. And I would say, put life at the center, not humans. Right? We still put humans at the center of our cosmology. Right? We think humans are the center of the universe. We are somehow a special case. We have to think about all of life as a practical objective, to really think about how do we design in a way that we can live on the planet in perpetuity. I'm working on the board of a new architecture school in Northern Canada. It's the first new architecture school in 40 years in Canada. And it's a tricultural project with French, English, and Indigenous leaders. So I've had another life-changing experience working with them. And I realized that they actually have a worldview that is the destination that I'm trying to get to. They've been there for thousands of years. And they don't privilege humans above the rest of life. They see us in the context of a living world, and they bring honor and respect to that living world. So one of the first projects that the students in this new school do is they go into the forest with an Indigenous elder, and they find a birch tree that is ready to give up its bark, and is how they describe it. And that's, at a certain point in the life of a birch tree, but just before it dies, it's ready to give its bark. And so they go up and they make one cut, and the bark of the tree comes off almost in one piece. And they make a canoe from that in the way that they have done for thousands of years. And everything that they use to make that canoe is material from the world that goes back to the world. So when they're finished with that canoe, everything that made that canoe goes back to the living world and becomes an input for the next generation of life. And that concept, I mean, I was so impressed and inspired and moved by what they were doing. And I realized that life-centered design concept is really what we have to move to, that we have to get to a way of working so that everything that we do can be done in perpetuity.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not stealing from future generations,
Mm-hmm.
which is what we're doing now. Right? We're stealing their life. And we have to stop that.
Great. What makes you feel free, Bruce?
Well, you know, it's a weird thing that I mostly feel that. I mostly feel I can go where my mind goes. And I have little control over that. And I can't really stop it from going there.
Mm-hmm.
So I realize that, you know, I have to give in to that wandering and exploration. And the more that I do, the better it is.
Nice. That was such a pleasure, Bruce. It was
Thank you. Thank you.
inspiring and touching, and I think it's gonna make a lot of service to everyone who's gonna be reading and listening to it.
Great. Thank you so much.
And it was a pleasure meeting you. I've been following you through the years, so it was a pleasure getting to meet you. But at least that's much more than nothing. So it's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. So when will this come out?
This will be aired in our channels. That's gonna be, I think, in 2 weeks. But I'll let you know. Well, I'll let you know. And then this is gonna be published in the newspaper in about 2 weeks too. So more or less.
In Spanish?
Yeah, in Spanish, in La Vanguardia, which is like the most important newspaper in Spain.
Okay.
So,
great.
but I'll let you know. You talk through Gisela, right? Gisela has your contact and everything.
Yeah, the Fiden folks will. Yeah.
Great, super. Then we'll be sending everything out, and we'll be in touch through that. And I'll send you the PDF and everything as well.
Good. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And you will put it on. Is it going to go on live also?
Live, yes. And then we're doing exactly in our digital, well, also in the newspaper, but in our digital channels, which is the Creative Net. The whole interview, we're editing it, and it's going also live, and also in my channels live. So it's going to be everywhere in a couple of weeks.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Very good questions. I think the questions are really superb.
Thank you.
Okay.
It's a pleasure. Okay.
Have a great day.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.